Go to Sydney, Australia and speak to the energy analyst, Mark Humphery-Jenner. Mark, welcome to the program. I'm a little bit confused. You know, in every newsroom in the world, all the journalists there, they get all these different wires from the different agencies. And I keep saying Russia sends this much gas to Europe, Russia sends this much gas to Europe. I thought that Europe was not receiving Russian energy. I thought they were sanctioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And firstly, thanks for having me on. And Russia, well, they are sanctioned, but a lot of Russian energy is going through to Europe via other third countries. And effectively, those areas are effectively laundering Russian energy to go through to Europe, or in some cases, the US. So there's even been reports about a Greek company buying energy, so buying oil from Russia, and then supplying it to the US military. So it certainly happens, and therefore certainly Russian energy is going to filter through into Europe, even when there are sanctions. It'll just slip through the cracks.
Okay, let's not necessarily classify that as sanction busting, because sanction busting can be far, far, far more serious. Is Russia doing that to bypass these sanctions?
Well, in terms of sanction busting, certainly that could be perhaps pursued against the individual companies. And some Western countries have pursued specific companies about doing that. Now, that's not to say that all companies are, or even any particular countries are engaged in that, but some specific companies are. And certainly there have been sanctions imposed against several hundred of those companies. However, when you impose a sanction against a company that is enabling a Russian company to circumvent sanctions, another company just pops up and does a similar thing. So it isn't totally effective, which is why we're seeing Russian economic growth continue to power along. So Russia's economy grew by 3% or so in 2023, for example.
But do you expect that kind of growth to continue? Because what we do know that Russia is doing is selling to former clients and selling more quantity to make up for what the West may not be buying, but selling those larger quantities at a lower price. So is that sensible in terms of Russia's economic growth to come in the years ahead?
Absolutely. It's not ideal to have to sell more quantity at a lower price to get the same total amount of revenue. So, for example, they'd be selling oil at less than they could really generate for it. However, it's been reported that the $60 cap on Russian oil hasn't actually really applied because they're selling oil for more than $60 through to places like China, for example. So those price caps and those sanctions, well, you don't even have sanction busting that enables Russia to avoid those. It's just avoided due to general market dynamics, which means that Russia's economy can continue to grow. Furthermore, a lot of it's propped up by military spending, with the government spending on military infrastructure, military equipment, and the like, which generates economic growth, and particularly domestic economic growth, because a lot of that needs to be domestically developed. So the IMF, for example, has recently indicated they expect Russia's GDP to grow by 3% in real terms in 2024. Now, granted, like I said, a lot of that is due to military expenditure, but it's still 3% growth. And that's larger growth than could be occurring in many Western European countries.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, Mark, because, of course, we know that Russia in the year 2024 is going to spend more on defense than it's ever done before. So interesting to note that that also helps growth. Really, thanks for putting that into perspective for us, Mark.
No, definitely. Absolutely. Thanks for that as well. And in terms of other things that have occurred there as well, we're seeing some moderation in things such as inflation. So, for example, inflation had been at 8%, but the IMF and Reuters had predicted that might go down toward 5% by the end of 2024. Still above the 4% target, but falling.
Mark Humphery-Jenner, thank you so much indeed, Mark.